Our first show of the Timberwolves offseason, we talk about where it went wrong against the Mavericks and the Tim Connelly restructure, all today on the Minnesota Basketball Party.
This is Locked On Sports Minnesota podcast. It's endless Minnesota Timberwolves talk with the diverse voices of your local experts. It's time for the Minnesota Basketball Party on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Wolves talk every Wednesday here on Locked On Sports Minnesota and the Minnesota Basketball Party. Welcome to the show. A bit of a melancholy vibe on this Wednesday because we don't have Timberwolves games to preview, but we've got plenty to break down. The season is over. It ended last Thursday night. We'll revisit why it ended in 5 against Dallas and turn the page to the offseason. We already have big news. Tim Connelly has restructured as the president of basketball operations, but it's not exactly a perfect deal with this ownership in flux. We're going to get into all of that on today's show with our panel of experts. My name is Tim Ekstrom, executive producer here at Locked On Sports Minnesota. Please subscribe if you're watching us live. If you're watching us on demand, please subscribe to YouTube and get us to 8,000 subscribers on the Locked On Sports Minnesota YouTube channel, or hear us on the Locked On Wolves podcast feed where Ben Beacon produces daily excellent Wolves content. Lots to get into today, but let's meet our panel of experts with our opening tip.
I'm Ron Johnson, former Gophers wide receiver, Gopher Hall of Famer, and just like the Timberwolves, I'm chilling today. I'm going to talk about why Tim Connelly is important for next year's season to be a success.
I'm Jack Borman, soon-to-be former editor-in-chief at Canasupis, co-host of the Locked On Wolves postcast with my man Luke Inman, and I'm going to explain why you should expect nothing but patience from the Minnesota Timberwolves this summer.
I'm Reggie Wilson, sports director at Care 11, and just like Jack, I think they should run it back.
And I'm Sam Ekstrom, as mentioned. And before the show's done, I'll tell you who I saw at the airport the day after the Timberwolves were eliminated. That's all coming up on the Minnesota Basketball Party. Let's jump backward in time, and then we'll fast forward to the events of yesterday with Tim Connelly. But we'll go back to Thursday. Timberwolves down 3-1 in the series, chance to send it to at least 6 by simply winning at home against a team that they'd played 4 close games with, and they get stomped. They get stomped 69-40 at halftime, never close. I don't know if they got within 20 in the last 2.5 quarters of that game, going out with a whimper. And the way I've described it is that if the Denver Game 7 was the Minneapolis Miracle, then the Mavericks series was going to Philadelphia and losing 38-7. That's what it felt like, Ron Johnson, when the Timberwolves went down 4-1 against the Mavericks. What ultimately, now that you've had about a week to process it, what do you think went wrong against Dallas?
Well, first of all, for those that are listening on the podcast, I am wearing a shirt with Olaf from Frozen, and it says chillin'. So that was the reason for that use of verbiage. But the Timberwolves are chilling, and I think that's what happened to start it off. It was too chill of a vibe. The whole bring your ass, all the stuff, everybody was so focused on the gimmicks and we got this. And the vibe was not the Suns vibe was, oh man, we got to beat the boogeyman. When it was the Nuggets vibe, it was, oh crap, we got to bring our A game. We got to the Dallas, it was bring your ass. Like what are we? It was way too chill. It was way too, we got this. It's way too, let's see what Jason Tatum and what you call it can do, Jaylen Brown. And I think that's what I felt like was doomed. They were doomed when they started acting way too like, I mean, it just, to me, it never had that feel of like, oh crap, here comes Kyrie and Luka. Like Luka's hurt. Luka might have been lying the whole time. I don't know if he got some bookies on his back or somebody over in his country. Like, hey man, like let's fake this thing so I can bet on you because nobody's betting on you right now. And that's what it looked like. Luka looked like he was playing cat and mouse. Looks like he was playing possum. Like, I'm dead. My knee hurts. Yeah, get this 40 real quick. And I think that's where it was doomed. It never to me felt like the Timberwolves until they were down 2-0. That's when everybody got tight. Everybody like seized up and said, okay, how do we? It was too late. it was too late. It's like when you forget to lock the door and you get that phone call and they say the killer's in the house with you. Anybody's ever seen a scary movie, especially if you're black, it's too late. White person might get out of that. Most black people in those movies die. So it's too late. And that's what happened. You are out. It's done. It was too late. At 2-0, it was too late. And that's where I think it was doomed. It was doomed from the start, in my opinion. And I said that. I think I tweeted. I said, let's drop this whole bring your ass thing. And that's where I leave it.
Yeah. If you show up in the least in either of those first two games, it's a 1-1 series. You probably come back home when it's 2-2, and the whole thing feels different. But late collapses, games 1, 2, and really 3 as well. Jack, is it as simple to say that the Stars didn't show up the way they needed to in this series, or is there more to it?
I swear that I did not show Sam my notes, but that is the A topic that I had written as my notes for this question. Yeah, I think, when you look at coming into this series, the Timberwolves Stars had scored 44% of the team's total playoff points, which is a great number for your two stars. And if you think that that Dallas had scored way more, that's not the truth. Kyrie and Luka had scored 45% of their points. And you could say, oh, well, that's because Kyrie didn't play well in the OKC series. Sure. But the numbers were what the numbers were, and both teams won their first two series, and that's how they got to the Western Conference Finals. And then in games 1, 2, and 3, Dallas's Stars scored 181 points on 49, 42, 81 shooting splits. The Wolves Stars in games 1, 2, and 3 scored 111 points, so 70 fewer points on 33, 23, 84 shooting splits. So they shot 33% from the field, 23% from three. It's just not going to cut it straight up. And then you want to look in the fourth quarter when the Stars for Dallas really showed up in those first three games. Dallas's Stars had 58 points on 18 of 32 shooting and 9 of 13 from three, while the Timberwolves Stars had 21 points on 7 of 21 shooting and 3 of 12 from three. It's just crazy. They were more than twice as good as the Timberwolves Stars were in terms of scoring the ball, and Dallas was able to consistently manufacture looks for their stars to score. It was much easier for those guys to get into positions to score. It's a huge credit to the Mavericks defense for the way that they, just played in the gaps and completely clogged the paint and made it so that the Timberwolves Stars just never really got comfortable as scorers. And Anthony Edwards and Karl-Anthony Towns certainly were better in game 4 and game 5, but, by that point it was way too late. And, the other part of this too is that everyone was exhausted. Right. I think you heard it from Ant, from Nas, from Finch, all in their post-game press conferences after the game 5 loss in Minneapolis, all, saying, we're going to have to train differently in the summer. That's what Ant and Nas both said, because it's not just an 82 game grind. It becomes an 100, 105, 110 game grind. And, that's just the reality of the situation with how good this team is right now and moving forward and how well they're set up for success. And I think that, it is a little bit concerning that they didn't have the gas to do it because they, walked through the Suns series in 4, and you had some days off during that Denver series, and you had some time in between the Denver series and the Mavs series to get right. And, the other part of it too, that I think is problematic is that Anthony Edwards and Karl-Anthony Towns have no real on-court chemistry. They don't run pick and roll together very well. They don't have a pick and pop game. They don't play off of one another all that well. And yet this team still went to the Western Conference Finals, which I think speaks to just how deep of a roster it is and just how well they've played defensively. And I think that, if they do end up running this back, which all signs point towards them doing, trying to come up with some way to help those two guys develop more of an on-court chemistry that we saw down the stretch of the 21-22 season when they went into that Memphis series and those two guys were playing really well together. I think they have to try to find a way to get back to some of that because they haven't really had much of it in the last 2 seasons here.
Yeah, Reggie, what doomed the Timberwolves? Let's get your take on it. And maybe if you want to go beyond the Stars, because Ant and Cat's certainly the big story here, but they didn't get a ton from Gobert in this series. Conley was playing banged up. Unfortunately, you got one huge Jaden game, one huge Nas game, and you lost those games. Do you think the role players were culpable as well, or does this fall on the star shoulders?
I think it falls on the stars. I think you got, I think you got from the role players what you were looking for most of the series. You know, you spoil a great Jaden game, you spoil a great Nas game, and honestly, I felt like that end of game sequence where Luca makes the three on Rudy and then Nas misses the three at the buzzer. I feel like that totally deflated the team and the series. I think it was pretty much over after that. And what was tough about that was, they went to Dallas and they were like, okay, if they win that game 3, they're right back into the series. And it just seemed like they lost the desperation and the urgency that they had in the last 2 series. They came out and blissed the Suns like, look, we can't give them nothing. We can't give them nothing. And they didn't, and they swept them. And then, they showed their youth a little bit against Denver. Denver was the defending champs. So, you have to give them credit for what they were able to do, winning 3 straight, and then the resiliency of the Wolves to win the last 2, especially how they did in that game 7. And, to Jack's point, I do think that they just ran out of gas. And then also to Ron's point, I don't think that they took Dallas as seriously. I felt like they maybe thought that they were gonna, walk through because they had some success against Dallas. But it was interesting. We didn't see the type of Timberwolves effort that we were used to seeing from them, especially on the defensive end. Like they had nothing for Kyrie and Luka. Like they literally had nothing. And I remember, I think I got on Twitter a couple days ago and they showed this sequence, and it was last year, but they showed this sequence, end of game sequence where Kyrie and Luka were basically playing like hot potato at the end, and the Wolves were just like on them, like, like white on rice. Like they were
Yeah.
all over them, and ended up, winning that game without the Mavs really getting off a good shot. And it was like, man, where did that defense go? And it was partly just them being gassed, and also just I feel like they just didn't have a good enough plan to go against these guys. Like I don't know that I don't want to say like they underestimated them, because I feel like that's unfair to the Wolves being another professional basketball team, but I don't think they were ready for what the Mavs brought. And I thought it was interesting, to Jack's point, something very telling from that end of season, well, what ended up turning into an end of season presser at the end after the game that night. Anthony Edwards said that they trained for 82 games and maybe a series, after that. Like, it was like, wow, really? Like, and give it to Ant, man. He's been pretty transparent, especially during the playoffs. Like, hey, I've never seen these type of double teams before, he said in the series against the Nuggets. And, he kept saying like, hey, Finchie's got me in the best shape of my life. But then after that game, he's like, man, I got to get back to the shape that I was in, when I was going to college, like how I was training and hitting the bikes and, all those things. It was just interesting to hear, to Jack's point, like how much they said that they needed to train a bit more to go further than they did. But that's the tough part about it. It's like, man, maybe you didn't think that you were going to do what you did, but maybe you still needed to train that way, because that was something that you just don't know. Like I look back at the 03-04 Wolves that went to the Western Conference Finals, and maybe you thought, oh man, this is a good team. Like we'll be back. That next year they got bounced in that first round. So it's like you just don't know when these opportunities are going to come up again, because next year, Denver's going to be back. The Clippers will, they hope to be improved. OKC is going to, be another year wiser with their young group. I know Jack's still not is convinced, whatever. But, got to figure out what my Lakers are doing. Like these, the Mavs are probably going to be back there. You just don't know how the West is going to stack up. Maybe Golden State goes and gets another guy to help Steph out, and maybe they're back in it. There's so many different things that are happening. You know, New Orleans may take a step. So it's hard to say, like, man, they'll get back, they'll be back, but you just don't know, because getting to the Western Conference Finals was a hard feat in itself, and thinking that they can just replicate that just right off the bat, I think it's tough. And that's what makes, you know, losing to Dallas so tough, because you're like, man, they had a chance, like, and they just kind of blew it.
But you never know with injury luck too. I mean, that was such a huge thing for the Wolves, especially. I know Cat missed some time, but
for the most part, the stars stayed intact. And to further your point, Reggie, you know, after they, in 2004, they were the 1 seed. It took them 14 years to get back to the playoffs. Like that's how things can change from season to season. And the NBA playoffs, it's like climbing a mountain, right? Like you get past the first series and it's like there's a plateau, and then you got to go to the next peak, and you get there and you say, I reached the top. Oh, nope. Yeah, false plateau. There's another climb. And you kind of get demoralized thinking, when am I actually going to get to the end of this thing? And that was the Timberwolves after the Nuggets series. They thought they reached the peak. They thought they won the Super Bowl of basketball. They hadn't yet. They were only halfway there, and they didn't have the gas. And I do think, too, that Reggie's hitting on something with Edwards' fitness, that it wasn't necessarily just this series, too. I think that he got worn down by the season. I think this is something we observed in him at times during the year, where it was tough for him to get up to be himself every single night. I thought it ebbed and flowed a little bit. Can we get that effort for 82 games? And if we do, I think he's an MVP. Like, I think that's what he could be if that was in the cards for him. But we'll get more into that. We'll get more into Tim Connelly's restructure as Timberwolves president, all coming up on the Minnesota basketball party. We are presented by BetterHelp. With BetterHelp, you have an opportunity to process life. There's a lot of different stressors in life that we want to get off our chest, some big, some small. But when you keep them bottled up, there's that cumulative effect, right? And it starts to impact us negatively. And therapy is a safe space to get those things off your chest, the big things, the small things, the stuff that's bothering you, the stuff that keeps you up at night. You want to figure out what's weighing you down so you can be at max efficiency. Try to maximize your happiness. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be very convenient, very flexible, suited to your busy schedule. Fill out a brief questionnaire, get matched up with a licensed therapist. Switch anytime for no additional charge. Make sure that that's a right fit for you. Get it off your chest with BetterHelp. BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. All right, back at it, Minnesota basketball party. Let's get into Tim Connelly. So 2 days ago, we see the report that Tim Connelly has come to an extension, or a restructure, I think was the phrasing. And we knew that Tim Connelly had the opt-out clause, the dreaded opt-out. Now, I don't think there was ultimately great concern because there weren't any job openings. The Pistons filled theirs. The Washington job, which was so alluring last year, that was filled last year. So I don't think anyone thought he was leaving. But the hope is that you lock him up long term. Well, instead, we find out yesterday that Tim Connelly basically kicked the can down a road a year. Ron, it's like the Daniil Hunter deal. Like for all those years, they kept going 1 year at a time. And they give him an opt-out after next season. And as Jack, I'm sure we'll get into, there's probably some ownership squabble that's influencing this, that Tim Connelly wants to know who the owner is before he commits long term. But Ron, let's start back with you on this. What does this 1 year pact with Connelly mean? Are you happy about that he's back for a year, or are you a little frustrated that it's still in flux? There's still no guarantees beyond 1 year with Tim Connelly.
It feels like it's more of him and not them. But I do believe that, because here's where I go with that, and that's why I said it was key for them to keep him. One, if he were to leave after this year, now all the questions swirl about what the team should look like. What could it have looked like? Why isn't Tim Connelly happy with almost making it to he made it to the Western Conference Finals, but almost making it to the NBA Finals. What's going on internally? Like all those questions start to swirl when that happens. What's going on? Why isn't he happy? Why isn't it this? I mean, think about the Justin Jefferson. Everybody had all these questions. I even looked at some of my old tweets, and I'm going to go back and say, man, my bad. I mean, not my bad. I probably was right. But like when people were saying like, oh, Justin Jefferson don't want to sign because they don't know what he's going to do at quarterback. He didn't sign until after they drafted the quarterback. So I think that was kind of like, Kirk Cousins not going to be here. I don't know if I want to be here for 5 more years. Oh, wait, you got J.J. McCarthy and Sam Darnold? Sam Darnold was a number 3 overall pick. J.J. McCarthy's a first-round pick. All right, I'm good. Give me my 140 and I'm good. So I think that's where Tim Connelly's at, is like, not to say he doesn't like Glenn Taylor, but he's probably seen a difference in ownership. And it's like, whoa, this is what the promised land could look like. I know what these two guys want to do. I know what they're willing to do to win a championship. I know what this guy wants to do, and I know where he's been before, and it didn't work. So why would I keep doing the same thing over and over and over again? I think that was kind of my key. I think Tim Connelly, it does feel like a Band-Aid, but I think it is a good Band-Aid. I think it's worth it to keep all the players and figure out what worked. What did you do in Denver to get Denver to where they are? And I think that's the goal. And if it does become a Mark Lowry and A-Rod team, and Tim Connelly signs a multi-year extension, then I think all is well. If Glenn Taylor takes over and the promises are right and he does it, but if Glenn Taylor takes over and he leaves, I think we're going to go back to that, and Minnesota might be back where they are, where Anthony Edwards is the star, maybe one of the bigs stay, and then they're going to probably, Mike Conley's probably done, and then it's time to start over again.
Yeah, I mean, Tim Connelly doesn't want to have his hands tied behind his back as he operates the team. He needs to know if the owners are going to pay the luxury tax. If they're not, well, then Tim Connelly's job just got a whole lot harder, a whole lot less fun, probably more set up to fail than to succeed if they're not allowed to spend over this threshold, Jack, which is going to get messy here, and we'll talk about this at length as well. But what's your take on what this 1-year deal means for Connelly?
Yeah, it screams to me that Tim Connelly does not want to work for the Timberwolves if Glenn Taylor is going to be the majority owner. If he comes out the other side on this. I mean, Tim Connelly was hired by Mark Lowry and Alex Rodriguez, and Glenn Taylor just kind of signed off on it since he was the one that was going to be paying for it in the interim. And by now it should have been Mark Lowry and Alex Rodriguez who were signing his checks. And I think that's why he partially wanted to come here. All of his, all of the recruiting, I guess, if you will, that tried to get Tim Connelly to come here was all Mark Lowry and A-Rod. And Glenn Taylor was the one who discouraged them from going after Tim Connelly because he said that people like that don't come here, is what Glenn Taylor said. Yeah. So, I think that's the only thing that it says to me. I would fully expect that Tim Connelly will sign a long-term extension with the Timberwolves, so long as Mark Lowry and Alex Rodriguez come out of this as the majority owners, which I think is the widespread, kind of expectation, if you will, as a result of this arbitration stuff. And I just think that like having Tim Connelly here is crucial for the Timberwolves. I haven't heard one person say one bad thing about Tim Connelly. I see Tim Connelly frequently at games. He, remembers everybody's name that he comes across, greets everyone with a warm smile, asks how their family's doing. It's those types of things that I think make him such a magnetizing person before you look at his extensively successful track record as a lead executive. And I think those are just the type of people that you want representing your franchise, across the league. And when you look at Connelly's track record, I mean, you can go through the 9 things, Sam. I don't know if you want me to go through kind of the things that he's done here, but I mean, you can really only categorize, in my opinion, 2 things that he's done as sort of misses, I guess, if you will, or net negative moves potentially. And one of them was signing Bryn Forbes, which is maybe a little unfair to Connelly considering that was a veterans minimum deal. And the other one you could say was drafting Wendell Moore at 26 in the 2022 draft. Obviously, like, there hasn't been a whole lot of opportunity for Wendell to play, but he also hasn't really forced himself into, playing opportunities. I think when you look at some guys that were taken after him, like Nikola Jovic was the guy that I wanted the Wolves to take back then, went to the Heat, was a starter for the Heat this year. Peyton Watson, Andrew Nembhard, Max Christie, Jaden Hardy are just some guys that were taken after him. So it's not like there are that many guys that, were after him that were like, this is such an obvious swing and miss. But I get, it's not like any of those guys are setting the world on fire. So I really do think that, when you think about how patient Tim Connelly's been over the course of his career, like, especially you look at the D'Angelo Russell thing, like everybody thought that Tim Connelly was going to have to trade D'Angelo Russell before last season started. He was like, nope, we'll just hang on. I'm not going to operate from a position of weakness. And what does he do? He ends up coming back to the negotiating table with other teams in the league with all the leverage. I mean, he was the guy that extracted not just Mike Conley and Nikhil, but also 3 second-round picks, and they used one of those to trade up and get Leonard Miller, who was a consensus first-round pick. And then, and he also did something similar when he traded a second-round pick that ended up getting him 2 seconds, and he got Josh Minot, and then gets Jalen Clark, who was a consensus lottery pick before he tore his Achilles. So, again, this is just a guy who's going to be patient. He is not going to just trade Karl Anthony Towns for financial reasons this summer, especially when you consider like all of the money that they made over the course of the playoffs here. That could, and we'll get into the luxury tax stuff. But I mean, I just really don't see it happening when you look at Tim Connelly's track record, and it's hard not to trust that, considering how good of an executive he's been. And that's just focusing on his time in Minnesota over these last, 2.5, 3 years, whatever it's been.
Yeah, the architect of 2 elite teams in the same division. Reggie could have been quite a gut punch if he had opted out of this thing after thinking you had him for 5 years when he signed, and then there were swirling rumors last year of him wanting to go to Washington, and then this year the opt-out, and that they haven't exactly had a steady offseason with Tim Connelly yet, and now they've got this ownership up in the air, so his hands are still a little tied. Like, I don't know how he operates, not knowing who the owner is going forward, but it is good to have his brain like still kind of operating this roster now for the next month.
Yeah, and I feel like it was touch and go there when he came out, and his very first big swing was getting Rudy Gobert. And, you trade one of the big men, Walker Kessler, that you got in the draft that, maybe people thought, you were high on, because, in that Memphis series, they couldn't grab a board to save their lives. And they were like, okay, we need to figure out a way how to grab some more boards. So they draft Walker Kessler. Walker Kessler has a pretty decent rookie year, and Rudy struggled. And everybody's like, oh man, what did Tim Connelly do? And then the Wolves come out, and they're the top team in the West for the majority of the year this year. And everybody's like, oh, man, Tim Connelly's a genius. He moves D'Lo, as Jack said, got Mike Conley. That ended up being like the perfect move for the Wolves. They needed that type of a point guard. They needed a high IQ player because, D'Lo is not a very high IQ basketball player. So, you added some intelligence to the room when it came to, getting things going with the team. And so that was a very good move. I think the one thing that it says to me, Connelly restructuring and staying, is that the Wolves are not content with the success that they had this year. Like, I feel like they are really trying to go for it and move forward. I feel like if Connelly is not there, maybe you question, like, okay, what direction does this team want to go next year? Well, Connelly's not staying if they are not trying to continue to make a push. Like, he literally saw the team that he helped build win a championship while he was in Minnesota, collecting a big check, no less. But, I'm pretty sure he still want one of those big rings that all the Nuggets guys got when they won the championship. So I think this signals to me that he wants to win. He feels like the Wolves are going to do what they have to do and give him the type of, runway to do what he needs to do to make sure that this team continues to win. And if I'm a Timberwolves fan, I'm excited about that because, there would be so many question marks if he's not there. And he stayed. To Ron's point, it is a little, that it's kind of, wait and see, like, okay, we're just going to take this year by year. That may be a little scary, but hopefully, with this ownership situation, that whole thing gets cleared up soon, and maybe Connelly can stay for the long haul and continue to try to build this team to be a perennial championship contender.
Yeah, let's talk about what the Wolves do financially with this second apron, the luxury tax, and how they proceed with all these big contracts on the books. That's coming up on the Minnesota Basketball Party. It's brought to you today by FanDuel. The NBA Finals starts tomorrow. Celtics minus 225, Mavericks plus 188, the series price. You can also bet on the NBA Draft. The Wolves are plus 5,000 to pick Bronny. You can do that at FanDuel as well. There are lots of great opportunities to wager on Stanley Cup Finals, NBA Finals. It's winner take all time in summer sports right now. New customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Find a lopsided money line, bet the winner, get $150 free. Put that on the spreads, the money lines, the player props, the Wolves taking Bronny, whatever you want. FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, let's start with Jack this time. Jack, you're very good about talking about money when it comes to the Wolves salary cap, the implications. There's a lot of numbers when you look at their salary cap table. What is the most important number here for the Wolves with all this money they have committed to not only Gobert and Cat and Ant, but McDaniels, big contract. Connelly, big contract. Naz Reid, big contract. It's not nothing. It's a lot of money. So how dire is the situation? And do you think if they keep the group together, is it a guarantee that they are well beyond that second apron?
It is a guarantee that they are well beyond that second apron. Yes, there's no question about that. Right now, so if they brought everyone back, so if they brought everyone that is on the books for next season back, that includes Wendell Moore and Josh Minott. They signed both of their draft picks, 27 and 37. They let Kyle Anderson go. They let Monte Morris go. And then they sign one minimum player to the active roster. So whether that's Jalen Clark or Luka Garza or Jordan McLaughlin, one of those three, and you'd still have one roster spot that you do not have to fill until maybe later on in the season with a buyout guy, something like that. So you don't get dinged for that open roster spot charge at the end of the season. The tax bill is going to be in between $80 and $85 million next season. And that's a conservative number when you consider the fact that, the Wolves may try to, bring Kyle Anderson back slightly above the veterans minimum. Maybe they do a draft and stash player at 37. So they don't sign that player right away this season. But yeah, I mean, that's the reality of the situation. And I think it would be a lot more dire, Sam, if they didn't just make the Western Conference Finals and you don't have a proof of concept with this roster. But I think the fact that you have a proof of concept with the roster and that you made the Western Conference Finals and you were 4 points away from being up 2-0 in the Western Conference Finals. I know fans aren't going to want to hear that. I know, it's hard to say, oh, well, if the game just, but the reality is they were that close. And when you're thinking about, building out the roster over the course of the long term, like that does matter. Like you do want to see like how close you are matters, even though you aren't there as Western Conference Finals champions. But yeah, the other thing that I want to say too, is that, trying to trade Karl Anthony Towns for financial reasons, after he was as important as he was to the Wolves winning in the first round and the second round would be really risky. Like you're mortgaging a lot of goodwill that you've built up with the fan base. And it's going to be really hard to get back a package that can immediately match or exceed Karl Anthony Towns' production in the aggregate, right? I think while, yes, the Timberwolves can play the long game with Anthony Edwards, Jaden McDaniels, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Naz Reid, all these guys are 25, 26 or under. But Mike Conley is going to be 37 by opening night, and Rudy Gobert turns 32 in 3 weeks. And while I know that age isn't necessarily what it used to be, like the current window of this exact roster is not open for years and years and years. I think that they've got maybe 1, maybe 2 years left with how this roster is presently constructed. Like, you're going to need to find a point guard of the future beyond Mike Conley. You have to wonder if Rudy Gobert is going to continue to look more like he looked this season or more like he looked last season, especially when you consider he's going to be playing in the Olympics in his home country of France this summer. So, those are all things that you've got to consider. But again, I think the fact that you made a Western Conference Finals, the fact that not paying a luxury tax bill, if you're on either side of this ownership war, is a terrible look. So I think the Wolves fans do have that going for them, and that whoever comes out of this has to be prepared to spend money, because it's there. Like, if you spend money, you will make money. And the value of the franchise has skyrocketed over the last calendar year, largely as a result of this team producing as well as it has. And then you factor in the very real possibility that the Wolves are going to have 20, 25 national TV games next year because of Anthony Edwards. All that stuff really matters. And, that $80-85 million number is a huge number. No question about it. But you make up for that. I personally think you make up for that with all the other notoriety that comes with having a team that's, centered around the superstar and Ant, all these national TV games. You're going to go deep in the playoffs next year again, hopefully, knock on wood, that can kind of balance all that out. But I just think it'd be awfully tough for either ownership group to just turn around and be like, nope, I think we got to cut salary a little bit and pull what the Twins just did after having an incredible season, that really reignited a fan base that I think has been dying to watch good MLB baseball or good NBA basketball. It is just a tough sell, and I don't think that's what's going to happen. So that's why I think they've got no choice but to be patient and continue to pay this thing and see it through and see where it goes.
Well, and all those owners, whoever the owner is, they're going to get a fat check from this new TV deal as well. That's going to get distributed. That's going to help pay for whatever tax it might be.
And then
go ahead.
Well, I was going to say the other thing then is when Seattle and Vegas come in, those new teams are going to go for over $4 billion, and that $4 billion gets split 30 or 31 ways with all the other owners. And so that's another $250 million or whatever the math ends up coming out to be on that covers the luxury tax for 2 or 3 years, which is also something to think about.
Yeah. What world are we living in where the Minnesota Timberwolves are the most expensive roster in basketball? $85 million tax bill that we're talking about seriously paying. I can't believe that they're inhabiting this stratosphere now from a financial standpoint.
It's insane, right? Because you don't think of small market. I don't understand how Minnesota is considered a small market, just considering the size of the market. But yeah, you think about that, you're like, goodness gracious. But also, that's a reason why Tim Connelly is here. That's a reason why he wants to stick around, because this team is going to do what needs to be done. You think about Golden State and how long they spent into the luxury tax, just because they created this team that was a dynasty, championship level contender year in and year out, and they won all those rings. And Golden State wasn't necessarily thought of to be a big market team, and they did what needed to be done. And now we look at Golden State the way that we look at them. But before, man, all those Nelly years and all that, they weren't spending like this. But if you want to win, then this is a situation that you're in. You have to spend in order to make. And yeah, the $85 million, that does sting, but also that may not be Glenn's problem any longer. So he's like, okay, yeah, I'll spend it, but then I'm going to get some big money for this sale of this team. And I look at this picture that I took, which is A-Rod, Lori, and Rob Nelson after Game 5, just sitting on the court having a powwow. And it was a pretty, I wouldn't say contentious, but it was a pretty spirited discussion that they were having about this whole situation that they're in right now with the ownership situation. And, we saw the report from Woj that they were trying to slash payroll next year. And Glenn Taylor was like, oh, no, we're not trying to do that. And I think it's going to be tough. Here's my thing with the whole trying to trade Cat thing. For one, that's a huge contract that you're going to have to try to move. And I don't know that you get the value for trading a guy like that. But also keeping the band together to pay off the T's, like to run it back. Like, I do think that there needs to be a different situation. After the game on Game 5, Ant said, yeah, we just never really were all the way in sync together. Like we didn't play all together. And that's something that they're going to have to work with. I don't know if like Ant and Cat need to train together at some point this off season. Also, Cat's got to get in the paint, because what we saw in this series against Dallas, like if the shots are not falling, he's not affecting the game. And when you look at Cat warming up and practicing, and during the times that we get a chance to watch practice, he's just shooting threes. He's not working on any post moves, and he's 7 foot. And I feel like he thinks he and Ant are like the same person. They're both guards, but it's just like when you have that type of size, it should be barbecue chicken. Like you should have a favorable matchup in pick and roll. When you have PJ Washington guarding you, like it should be barbecue chicken. And so I think, yes, it would be smart to run it back because we saw the success of this team, but also there are leaps and bounds of progress that could be made in the offseason to make this team even better, even if they just stand pat with the roster that is there. So one is spending into the luxury tax and that second apron, trying to get this ownership situation together, but also doing it with a purpose.
Ron, thoughts on this sticky financial situation? I mean, you're on the Vikings all the time. It's cool to have generous owners, right? The Wilfs just spend and spend and spend. They're willing to spend until they get a championship. For years and years, we never thought the Wolves would do that, but they might be doing it now because of A-Rod and Laurie and this team that they have. What are your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, well, the current tax bill for the Timberwolves, it looks like 51 could go up to 72. And so again, these are moves have to be made. That's where I think Jack's getting that 85. And if you look at Phoenix, 104, but did they get anything out of it? No. You look at the Boston Celtics, 47. You look at the Denver Nuggets, 39 is their tax bill. So you have to spend to win. And I think that's the end of this. Like, you got to spend to win. It is what it is. If you're a billionaire, 85 million, hey, just go get yourself a ring. The Yankees did it for years. They bought themselves championships for years. And then the Boston Red Sox found a way to knock them off without doing it. And that's why they somehow made a movie about it with whatever his name is. And the redhead, I forgot
Jimmy Fallon.
Yeah,
Fever Pitch.
Yep, Jimmy Fallon.
Did I just answer a Ron Johnson
you
movie?
You did answer the movie question. Jimmy Fallon.
Oh my goodness!
Look at Sam. Oh my goodness, you've grown so much, Sam, over the years. Now you're watching movies and Drew Barrymore. That's what it was. But when you think about this, I honestly believe, who cares? Spend the money. You're rich. If you want to win, do it. You're going to get the money back, like Jack said, like Reggie said, like you guys have all said. You're going to get the money back. You got TV. You got expansion coming. You got marketing dollars. Like, the more you win, the more money. That was always the thing with the Yankees. People are like, oh, if you're a Yankee, you can get big money. If you're a Giant, New York Giant, you're going to get big money from marketing. If you win, the sponsors will come. If you win, the sponsors will want to be attached to you and pay big money to have billboards up with your players and your logo, to have stores. Like, look at Jack Links, to have stores inside your building, and they want to be a part of you. Just win. Spend the money, you'll win, you'll make the money back. And so that's where I look at this. I totally get it. But if they try to break this down and try to, let's save a little bit of money here, it's never going to work. It's like when you taste something that's really good and you have it and then you try to replicate it. You never really can if you don't have what you originally had. You have to have the original ingredients for it to be exactly the way it is. And that's where a lot of teams go wrong. They win one way and then they try to mess with it. Like the Chiefs, they know what their formula is. The Patriots, they knew what their formula was. When you move an ingredient, you can keep trying to do what you're doing, but it doesn't work. So if I'm the Timberwolves, I stick with it. They have the second highest right now tax bill. And we know the Phoenix Suns are going to cut crap. They're going to cut. They're not trying to pay this. So it's going to be the Timberwolves at number one, but who cares? Go win. But when you look at number 4, Boston, Or sorry, 3 was Boston, and then 9 was Dallas. So Dallas is the outlier. They're not in the top 5, but Milwaukee, Denver, Boston, and Minnesota, 2, 3, 4, and 5, all, if healthy, we're pushing for an NBA championship. You got to spin to win. Like, and I guarantee if I go down this list, I bet the Pistons are there they are. Pistons, 29th. Look at all that money they have because they suck. They ain't got to spend no money. So, like, I could have guessed that. And this one I didn't know, but I guess getting rid of James Harden, the 76ers are 30th. So I guarantee they're going to try to spend some money this offseason as well because they realize they need another scorer.
Yeah, they can put something around Embiid and Maxey, and yeah, that's going to be a dangerous team.
We got $108 million in space right now. So,
dang.
Yeah.
We got about 3 minutes left. Mavs Celtics start tomorrow, game 1. I want your prediction, your series prediction, and also, would it make you feel better about the loss if the Mavs go on to win the championship? Start with Reggie. I think he's muted.
No. I think I mean, yeah, our team lost to the eventual NBA champions. I don't know, that never made me feel good, especially last year when the Wolves got bounced by the Nuggets. I'm sorry, when the my Lakers got bounced by the Nuggets
and the Wolves. Yeah,
well, the Wolves too, but I'm like, I'm okay. I don't think that made me feel any better about my team, especially with how Mike Malone and all those guys just kept pimping, their success over the Lakers, even after they won the championship, being sore winners. But anyway, I'm not bitter still or anything like that.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Series prediction. Who wins and how many games?
I'll go Celtics just because Jason Tatum is from St. Louis, and I'm a big St. Louis guy.
Sick of these light-skinned guys, man. Forget that, Reggie.
Man, look, St. Louis, baby. Jaylen Brown's dark skin.
True.
Ron, 1 minute. Your prediction.
I'm gonna go Dallas. I want if the Timberwolves lost, I hope the people that beat them win the championship. So I'm gonna go Dallas. I'm not a hater. I don't care. I know some people are mad about. I don't care. I want to see Kyrie get him a ring with those shoes on.
All right, Jack.
Yeah, it pains me to say I'm going to go Celtics in 7. If Porzingis is himself and healthy, if he's not, then I'll take the Mavs in 6. But I just think Drew Holiday, Derek White, and Al Horford are a lot better than PJ Washington, Derek Jones Jr., and Daniel Gafford. They've got 5 guys who can space the floor in clutch time, and the Mavs aren't going to be able to pack the paint like they did against the Wolves. So, yeah, I'll go Celtics in 7 if Porzingis is healthy, Mavs in 6 if he's not.
Do you think they got Jaylen Brown is going to go Luka?
That's what happened early in the game when they played earlier this season, where Brown guarded Luka early and then they switched Drew onto him late. I'd imagine that's what happens. What happens here?
I'm going to go Mavs in 6. I just look at what their record is with that group on the floor together. It's pretty gaudy. It's pretty insane. They haven't really been challenged that much by good teams in the playoffs. I think that the Mavs actually win this thing. And to pay off the tease, I saw at the airport on my flight to LA from
Jordan Woods,
Kenny the Jet Smith sitting in first class.
Did his knees look as bad as they look on TV?
He really wasn't moving that well. He wasn't moving. He looked a little lethargic. The strain of a long season of sitting at the desk with Shaq and Chuck will do that.
You could have beat him to the board, Sam. You could have beat him to the arrivals and departures board.
Yeah. I think I could have, if we had to sprint to the gate to catch the flight, I think I would have beaten him in the foot race. But that's all we got for today. Minnesota basketball party on Locked On Sports Minnesota. The football party tomorrow, the roundtable on Friday. It's a full lineup. But for Ron, for Jack, for Reggie, I'm Sam Ekstrom. Thanks for watching and listening on the Locked On Wolves audio feed. We'll talk to you next week.